fact table over here, where, it literally is my information. In 2014, I got to Singapore, and the first day they took me over to DBS Bank. So, a first record was actually created of account opening in DBS Bank. And then you basically have subsequently, I went in through the day, and then, there were like three other records that were created, right, in my transaction table. So I've got my foreign keys over here, customer, bank, location, transaction. I see all of you folks are developers, so I don't need to belabor this. And then thereby, I also have a master table here, which the primary key here is the location. And I use that basically to go out and build out a data model, which you guys know very well, like literally go up, add these to, our in-memory DB in our Excel itself, just to kind of keep you simple, because I just want to reiterate a couple things. And so, I've got my primary key, and then I've got my foreign key, and I build out my one-to-many relationship. Now, uh, because this, Power Apps has become so pervasive, and not just for typical developers who come from the IT area. And I also noticed that people who actually come from the Dataverse side with business applications might not have this view, because when they look at Dataverse, and especially when they come in from Dynamics CRM, they know, one to many and then many to many, but they won't actually have seen it the way, people who come in from the data side actually see it, right? If you come in from the data side, either from the SQL side or from the BI side, this is bread and butter. This is something that you look at every single day, right? Whereas when you come in from the biz app side, you may not have actually gone to this level. In fact, in Power Apps, you don't actually see this, right? It becomes even more acute as you go into SharePoint. Now, on the Dataverse side, this is beautiful because we have the concepts of environment, we have the concepts of business units, and we have the concept of users, right? So within these three, you can actually build out exactly this layer of security, and then you snowflake your data, right? So you can actually do that in Dataverse. But whereas when you're actually building it on SharePoint, which oftentimes end users end up doing, they don't actually use Dataverse because their organizations say, hey, look, we don't want to pay for Dataverse. We would rather use the seeded license of Power Apps on SharePoint. Then as you put down end users who are not exactly from the IT background, then it becomes a little bit more of an acute problem, right? As to how to manage security. And then the next thing, because these guys are also business users, right? So they'll actually have the domain knowledge, and they'll have the data, right, that they generate. And then if you don't plan the security out there properly, then everybody can have access to everything, right? So out here, a simple example of this is I've got some little app that I was actually using on training, and there were multiple things we were actually showing people. Is one of the things is, hey, look, if you're from business unit A, if I'm logged in here as, with my Active Directory ID, I should only have access to the business units that I have actually access to. And now this same concept applies even to our Copilot Studio, right? If I were to host a Copilot Studio over here, if I were to go insert and add a Copilot Studio little gizmo here on the right, then that should respect the same business unit security that I have in the app. So the concept applies to everything related to Power Platform, right? So for which, basically what I do, and I'd heartily welcome everyone to chime in over here, is on the SharePoint site, I go in and I actually define a master security table here, right? I mean, this is a very poor table. In reality, it'll actually have like as many business units and, roles and so on and so forth, right? So here I've got I'm using the title column to come up the business unit, but normally you would actually have the business units themselves as a master table, and then you look that up into this security table. But I've just kept it simple here. So I've got business unit A, B, and then, ignore the master tables over here. And then I've got the email IDs who basically the accounts that are, going to be there in this business unit. And then I go and basically I add like literally a yes, no table column over here that says, hey, look, am I an administrator or not, right? And the reason why I have an admin or not is the ability to go manage a master table, right? So in your app, you will have master business units, master currencies, so on and so forth. and then you don't want the end user to have access to it. So you can actually go in and basically say no here and read that into your app. And then finally, you can have many layers here. One would be a user, another would be a verifier, and the third would be, let us say, an approver and then an administrator, right? So you could have multiple columns over here, which would be a yes or no column, right? So the fundamental point over here is there are people who are plain old users. There are people who are verifiers, meaning that when you submit an item, they actually verify that the data is okay because the user might not have entered the data properly. As an example, I was actually working with a foundry here at NUS, and then there were professors who would go in and select all kinds of finance codes because they weren't interested in that. They were interested in the equipment that they wanted to buy. So they would randomly select some general ledger code, whatnot. And then if it goes to the professor just the approval chain, they're just going to look at the equipment. Nobody pays attention to the administrative stuff. So you could get approved in the wrong business unit, in the wrong, general ledger code, so on and so forth. So there would be a team that would actually go verify the data, right? So you could have a column here called verifier. And then, once the professor submits the data, you could actually deep link that particular line item to the app so that when the verifier clicks on that link, through a automated to an instant flow with the link to the form, and the form opens up and the verifier corrects it, and then you send it along, right? So you could have a verifier column, and then finally you could have your approver column, and so on and so forth. So this security table is what we would actually build out in SharePoint. Now, once you get into Power Apps over here, what you do basically is in your app on start, right? So I'm going to just go to the on start property, and then, obviously you're setting your variables and so on and so forth. I mean, this is just an example, but in reality, you would actually do much more depending on which organization you represent, so on and so forth. And then here you basically go add a collection, right? So I have a collection called security over here. And then what I'm doing here is literally going to my master security table, and for all the entries over here, just looping it like it's a for loop, as you guys know. And then I'm collecting everything within my collection here, right? So this one thing actually collects everything, including, whether, and I've said, admin, the column here, admin reads out the true or false over here in the admin. And then if I were to run this, I'm going to actually minimize this and then go up and run this. My collection over here, and my collection over here shows whether I'm an admin or not, or who this particular person is an admin or not, or a verifier or approver, so on and so forth. You can actually get this into your app. And then once you actually get it in your app, at the very first instance, you have your business units displayed over here to the users. And then all I simply do over here is I basically go to the display mode property. I mean, you could do a couple things. You could go to either the visible property, or you could actually go to the display mode property over here. And I'm basically saying, hey, look, first of all, filter the collection for the email that is in this particular variable. And this var user variable essentially, takes the user who is logged in and their credentials, right? So it is basically filtering, first of all, the email ID in this collection. After that, it actually filters the BU, so, business unit A in this case. And then it basically says if the business unit A that is represented in this button is actually in this filtered column, business unit column, then you actually show this button. Otherwise, you actually hide it. As simple as that, right? So this is the first layer, if you will, where it checks if the person has authentication or not. And you could have some 10, 15 business units. And remember, the altitude over here is a departmental app. Like you could have 100 people within the department. Let us say it's a foundry. Let us say it is some kind of a thing, or it's actually like a finance department or an HR department. And then you're actually working on, let's say, feedback collection app, or you're actually working on, like what we just talked about, right, is employee benefits and so on and so forth, training requests. So if you're actually doing those sort of workloads, I'm not talking about your Dynamics 365, all of enterprise workloads. I'm talking about the ancillary workloads. This is plenty fine, where it actually goes in and allows people buy what they have access to into the app. The second thing, what you could do is basically go to the transaction table out here. And in the transaction table, I've basically got, requester is the user. And then when it comes to the approver or multiple layers of approvers, if you will, you can actually go insert inside a data card your what you call as drop down, and then just filter the collection that you have, where you actually say, hey, BU is whatever the business unit you've actually selected up front. So basically when you go in, when you log in here, when you click on it, on select, I basically collect the business unit into a variable. You see, I basically say, hey, put this variable into, put this business unit into this variable, and then navigate over to the transaction form here. So I'm going to go to the form. And then if I were to look at this form over here, basically the BU is now according to in the the collection, the BU is now whatever I actually clicked on. And then basically it says the admin is actually true is my second condition, right? So based on this, it actually says, okay, these are the email IDs you're actually responsible for. And then if you have multiple, how do you say, boxes like this, you can actually say, hey, look, exclude the one that you actually selected before, and then you're done, right? So in a very simple way, when you're not coming in from Dataverse, when you're coming in from Dataverse, oh man, it is beautiful, right? Dataverse is such a beautiful, beautiful business management tool, such that you can cordon off. I know you guys prefer dev, test, and production. My way of classifying the environments actually comes from my MBA, right? It's a different way of classifying the environments. So I cordon off a bunch of things right there. Then you apply the concept of business unit inside that environment, and you basically cordon off the business units. And then you have the users who are tied to the business unit. So you don't need to do this kind of jugglery over here when it comes from Dataverse. But then in many much of the places over here in Singapore, what I've seen is even though IT actually has the licenses, they don't actually hand it to the users. They still stick with, hey guys, and I'm not just talking about local Singaporean firms. I'm talking about MNCs as well. They're very reticent. The US does not, US MNCs, they say, hey, don't allow the end users to actually have Dataverse, right? They make it categoric. In these kind of cases where they don't allow, this process makes it dead simple for people to plan their business unit security. And the good news here is if you go to any kind of finance lead or an operational lead in sales, sales operations, or you're talking about, let us say, engineering operations and so on and so forth, they know this out cold, right? They know the classification of roles and security out cold, right? Because they do this day in and day out. So it becomes very simple for them to, how do you say, construct this particular table. And then for when they build it out, for them to actually use it here, right? The only thing over here is obviously they'll need to, monkey around a little bit with filtering and but this is not anything extraordinary. It is, if you have done actually if statements and switch statements, this is fairly straightforward for them. And then you can manage your application, right, with this security. Simple to do when it comes to SharePoint, and it's effective to actually roll out. The only other thing I will actually say is, let us say, you're actually meeting, the developer. And when I say developer, I'm not talking about only the IT person. It could be someone who's an HR or what do you call operations, who actually has built this app out. And let us say they actually have this SharePoint list, and you go to lunch with them or coffee with them, and they accidentally give you the link. They say, oh yeah, here is the link. I'm going to actually copy this, put it on Teams. Guess what? Your security has gone to shreds right now, because if you have the contribute permission in SharePoint, and if you're part of these members over here, well, they will actually have access to this particular table, right? So then what you do is you go in and configure SharePoint security, where, instead of contribute, there is something called as a contribute minus permission. So in that, and there is again, I have a video on it, kindly feel free to look at that video. It's on YouTube as well, right? So off late, I've started doing these YouTube videos. I was very lax on it. I used to be more on LinkedIn, but I said, hey, look, people seem to kind of sort of like it. So I started doing those videos. And what you could do there is in the contribute permission, you actually say they can come here and then they can do their CRUD operation as users. But guess what? If they actually like get hold of the link, it basically says request access. You follow me? So I've implemented that in a couple places where they come in, it says request access. Then they say, hey, how come we don't have access? They're like, hey, that is none of your business. Coming here to the transaction list and the master list, no, that is not your agenda. Whatever you want to do, you do it from the application. Don't actually do it from the database. Okay. With this, I'll stop. I'll hand it back to our friend Golak here, and would welcome anyone, any questions, any thoughts. I know Dhruvan has left, but I now recognize Mr. Hidayat. I didn't initially recognize Hidayat. So, kindly go ahead. Any thoughts, any questions? I would welcome, by no means is anybody an expert today. Don't get, how do you say, don't get, oh my God, MVP. MVP doesn't mean the person is an expert. Nobody is an expert
Yeah.
today. There is so much information coming at us that we are all learners, right? So if you folks have done something different, kindly feel free to, Hidayat, Irfan, it was lovely to hear you, Irfan,
Karthik, yeah,
Palash, you too. Please.
I
Thanks,
can
Sanjiv.
see Yogesh.
Not sure whether
Yeah,
you can
but
hear me.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks, Sanjiv,
absolutely.
for the
yes, yes,
demonstration.
yes.
Yeah.
It's really insightful learning for me as well. So what I've done differently was I've used Azure groups to put the
Ah,
users in the specific groups
right.
and get those groups and read the group name, and then based on that figure out
Beautiful.
permissions. So that's
Beautiful.
another, I would say, an alternative to
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
But your one is
Lovely.
great too.
Excellent. So let me ask you a couple of questions. So when you say Azure groups, you're talking about security groups in Entra ID?
Yeah, security groups. Yes, you
Gotcha.
can grab.
The
Yeah.
gotcha. That's a fantastic idea. The one thing I would say is when I go to this BU here as a SharePoint site, this itself is actually a security group. You
It
follow
is.
me, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of get stuck over here because this itself is a go, and I'm actually subdividing within a site.
Mhm,
So technically, what I could do is I could use like sub pages and whatnot. But the thing is,
mhm,
then it gets a little bit complicated, but absolutely works is that you could dump a bunch of users over here, and
mhm,
then you could basically say all of these folks will actually have access. The
yeah.
only thing I would say is that if you do have like divisions like transaction tables and master tables over here, if you do use that approach, they will have access to everything here. You follow me, right? Because this is a security group in and of itself. This is an Azure AD group.
Mhm,
So, people are, if you put the users here, all the 18 people here will have access to everything unless you actually go in and specifically actually like do a security table on top of it.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
one more thing, Sanjeev, just want to add. So I think having that master, SharePoint list is also additional, sort of work for an admin person, which is
Yeah.
make sure someone join in a business and then later on decide to leave the next week. So it's just
Yeah.
like, more work for the, IT person to go and remove the person and add the person to the list. So
Right.
that was probably the bottom reason I choose actual ID group. It's just one
No,
saying.
no,
Yeah.
100%. I mean, those have to be planned absolutely, and that is absolutely true. You could use security principles and things like that and time it and then, cordon off access, whatnot. But kindly do remember that these are administrators, end users who are actually like, who have got an app for like 100 people app that they're actually managing. So
Mhm.
then, you have co-owners and you have a few administrators. As an example, in the one that I was actually talking about, there are 6 or 7 administrators for this, So if one person's down on a cold or something,
Yep.
then the other person can go manage it and so on and so forth, But fantastic point, Irfan. Anyone
Thank you.
else? Yeah, absolutely, sir. Anyone else? What have you guys done? Pavan, Hidayat, um,
Palash, Yogesh. I can
Palash,
see Yogesh
Palash
also
Hero,
there.
Yogesh. Have you gone to sleep already? I assume, or you're watching, have you gone to sleep watching cricket, maybe? There is an Australia-India match going on, right? It's a test match, right, as they say.
Yeah, Pavan is
Not
trying
like
to
No,
say
that. No,
something.
Sanjiv, we are here. So
Yes,
mostly we use a
Yogesh
similar
also.
approach
One
because
sec, one sec,
we
one
work
sec.
with.
Yeah, Pavan, go ahead, sir. Yeah, go ahead, Pavan.
So mostly we used a similar approach because we work with database environments, right? So
Yeah,
mostly we followed a similar approach.
got it. Got it. It becomes
And
more
coming to
important.
Power BI, only I think we use some row level security, and
That's right.
that's how we managed.
That's right. That's the interesting part, Pavan, because if you come from that world, the database world, right, this is everyday life. You follow me? Every
Mm.
single day we go create these roles and then add people to the roles. And there's even Power BI, as good as it is, could actually use especially if you have hundreds of roles. At Microsoft, there were like zillions of roles, right? And then if you have to go manage, it becomes very tedious, right? So I wish they're talking about security so much nowadays. I wish they could actually give it cross location. You follow me? So where you could do the security either go into SharePoint, or you actually go into Azure AD, or you go into Power Apps, or, multiple in Copilot Studio, so that it can be kind of sort of centrally managed, which unfortunately we don't have nowadays, right? So, yeah, hopefully that happens, at some point. But great point.
The data source level, like for this data source, we should have the security. For this user, we need to have like that, right?
Exactly, right. So, in Power BI, when you go in and actually manage roles, right, that is one
Mm.
approach. Whereas in
Mm.
Azure, when you go to app registrations in Azure,
Mm.
you go in and then you have like thousands of different roles, right? Why can't we make that a standard and then have something like that as like a centralized place where we can choose whether it's Dataverse or whether it's SharePoint or whatever, and we set it up over
Mm.
there and consume it within our Power App. You follow me, right?
Mm.
Instead of having to do it in each location, and then
Mm.
that is something that Microsoft has to think through. The Power BI guys are sitting right next to the Power Apps guys, or maybe not.
Mm.
Actually, maybe not.
Mm.
They're not. I know the CVP of Power BI, Arun Ulad. He was actually here in Singapore, and then about 6, 7 years ago, he went to Redmond as a manager, and now he's a CVP, an amazing guy. He knows
Mhm.
this, right? Because his cousin is the Charles Lamana sitting right next door. So why don't they kind of commonize? And especially nowadays when Satya is putting so much emphasis on security, so these
Mm.
kind of things they should you know try to give us like a centralized approach,
Mm.
as a
Yeah,
yeah.
each product has a different security as of now.
Yeah, yeah. Great thought. Anyone, Palash, how about you, sir?
I think Yogesh was saying
Oh,
something.
Yogesh, yeah, go ahead, sir. Go
Yeah,
ahead, go ahead.
earlier he opened up his mic, but Pavan was saying something. That's why he kept
Oh, I
quiet.
see. Yeah, Yogesh,
Yeah,
go ahead, sir.
Yogesh.
Yeah, sorry, I was just mentioning like I was not sleeping. That's the only thing I was
Ah.
saying that.
Okay.
You are highlighting at that. No?
No, no.
I thought you
Okay.
are having access of my house CCTV or something. Huh? You
Oh
told
my
like
God.
watching cricket or what?
That's yeah, exactly.
I'm
It's
just
a test
kidding.
match, right? It's a test match. Who's going to be
Yes,
awake
yes.
during a test match, nowadays, right? I don't think anybody other than the players will be awake, Even the players will be asleep in the pavilion, right? Watching these guys keep leaving the ball one after the other. Uh,
Correct.
anyway, yeah. Hidayat, how about you, sir? I'm pretty sure you would have done a whole lot of applications now.
Yeah, Hidayat, actually, I can see he mentioned in the chat. Sorry, sir, I'm an incognito sore throat. I'm also
Oh,
using
sorry,
your
sorry.
approach to restrict permissions for end users. Security
Ah,
group is a good approach to maintain
gotcha.
users list.
Gotcha. Lovely. Lovely folk. I think that's about it. We are
Yeah, I think
done.
that's all. Palash, if you have anything, or Karthik also we did not hear. I think we
That's
discussed it with
No,
Rehan.
I'm more into the
Yeah,
SharePoint guy. So
yeah,
yeah,
okay.
just exploring and the Sparats and those things, and
yeah,
just
yeah.
exploring and keeping
And
tab on.
now everyone is SharePoint guy. I think Sanjeev, you know, right? Our all
I know that,
big
yes,
YouTubers
but
are
I
into
still
SharePoint
didn't get
earlier.
a much
Yeah.
opportunity on Paras deep development.
Ah,
So
okay. Yeah. Power Apps, Karthik, is kind of sort of become like a de facto data entry, into SharePoint, man. SharePoint has become more of a backend right now. For
Yes,
collaboration,
but
it is, for
those who
collaboration,
were
it's been
past
replaced by
developer,
Teams.
right?
Huh?
Those who are past SharePoint full-end developer, they're still
Right.
sticking with the SharePoint.
The SPFX
Because
and all
the
that.
new
Yeah.
guys who are entering into this development activities, they are switching into Power Apps, but we are still sticking with the SharePoint.
Sticking with SharePoint. You can do a lot with SharePoint, Yeah.
They are using it as a base because whole teams runs on SharePoint.
Right.
Everything runs on SharePoint. Yeah.
Correct. And it's coming back now with the Copilot Studio, right? So all your documents basically are going to be there. Yeah.
Copilot. Something SharePoint agents they
Yeah.
introduced. I have to explore that also.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, on SharePoint now there is Copilot, right? That came out during Ignite. I don't know if you
Yeah,
noticed
that's
it.
what. That's what they call it as SharePoint agents.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now
Okay.
that's why Sanjeev said from start of our discussion, right? I was saying Dhruvin. Now it is agent 007. Everywhere agents across the place.
Yeah. I mean, it's a
Okay.
So each version one
massively.
agent number is increasing.
Yeah, massively exciting time, man. I tell you, a lot of the stuff, what Dhruvin showed, in order for you to do that, you'll have to get into Power BI and, create all kinds of DAX queries, this, that, and the other. Now you just ask the question and it spits out the data, which is remarkable, actually. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, folks,
Okay.
what we would say is if anyone wants to come in and actually, you guys have so much of wealth of knowledge, right? If anyone wants to come in, please let us know, drop us a line, on any topic. We don't basically hold ourselves to only one thing. So long as there is a small sprinkling of, Power Platform there, we are good. But any topic, please do come in because we would love to learn, know more, share that kind of a thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So basically, anyone interested to share their experiences, knowledges, welcome.
Yeah.
That's what I think
Yeah.
Sanjeev sir is trying to.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, folks. This is a forum where nobody is looking at you except friends. We don't have bosses looking at you. So if you want to come in and improve your public speaking, as an example, on complex topics, how to make it simple and present it in a way where people can understand, this is an excellent forum to do that. So, that's having good communication is super important, right? It's complex and it's super important. So you could kindly use this forum to come in and not only talk about the technical stuff, but to improve your presentation skills as well, Okay, so yeah, over to you, Golak.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think in that note, it's already on the time. Hardly we are giving 10 minutes back to you guys
Lovely.
to spend your time on weekends. So thank you so much for joining. And thanks, Sanjeev sir, for sharing the information.
Most welcome.
It's regarding Power BI, and we know a lot of information regarding Power Virtual Agent, or sorry, Copilot Studio now. Name Copilot Studio or agents. So now everywhere agents, I think we shared earlier, everyone can see the book of news, just go through and see what's new coming up in Microsoft space. Looking forward, more information, more insights, and what's next coming in the Microsoft space. Let's see, wait and watch. That's what we can say.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you,
Cheers.
everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.